Hello everyone, and welcome to our summer favourites at Kimmel Bay Church. I got a question for you to begin with. Do you ever watch a programme on TV called Who Do You Think You Are? It's a programme where celebrities trace back their family trees. And occasionally they find they're related to some great character from history, maybe even a king. Sometimes though they have a big shock when they discover a skeleton in the cupboard, finding that some of their ancestors were nasty pieces of work, or maybe even criminals. As a bit of fun, hope these people don't mind, but I've been trying to imagine who some of our church leaders might be related to. For example, Darren, I know he loves running. Maybe he's related to Philippides, the runner who brought back to Greece news of the great victory at Marathon. Or maybe one of Eric's ancestors was a monk who grew herbs in his garden to heal the sick. Or maybe Tony's great ancestor could have been Christopher Columbus, sailing the ocean blue in 1492. And I wonder if Kevin's great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather was the author of Macbeth or King Lear. I wonder. In my last vlog, I told the story of Caleb, a very confident, respected man, one of the faithful leaders of Israel. I'd be pretty impressed if I was related to him. However, today I'm going to talk about someone else, a very different person, someone whose life was a complete mess. She was despised, abused, the lowest of low. But God saw something in her. He saw a woman of great faith, someone who could play a part in the history of his people. Now, she wasn't even an Israelite, she was a Canaanite. We can read about her in Joshua chapter 2. Her name was Rahab. A little bit about her first. She was certainly one of the most despised people in Jericho. Now, women were already second-class citizens there, but Rahab couldn't have got any lower. She was a prostitute that ran a house of ill repute, a house that adjoined the walls of the city. She was scorned by the people, abused and treated cruelly, and she lived her life in constant fear. It was even worse because a huge Israelite army were approaching the city, and she feared for her very life. Then, miraculously, God provided an opportunity that would transform her. The king of Jericho knew that the Israelites were preparing to attack, and he suspected that there were spies in the city, so he sent out his soldiers to catch them. And as they began their search, the spies took refuge in Rahab's house. The soldiers, by asking some of the citizens in the city about unusual people they hadn't seen before, the soldiers tracked them down to Rahab's house. And they started hammering on her door, demanding that the men should be brought out. Rahab took them up onto the flat roof and hid them under stalks of flax, and then went down and told the soldiers that the men indeed had been there, but they'd left, and they'd headed for the city gate, saying that if they hurried, they would catch up with them. When the soldiers had left, she brought the two spies down from the roof. Now, the next part of the passage is critical, so I'll read it out for you. This is what she said. She said, "I know that the Lord has given you this land, and that a great fear of you has fallen on us, so that all who live in this country are melting with fear. We have heard how the Lord dried up the waters of the Red Sea for you when you came out of Egypt, and how you completely defeated the two kings of the Amorites east of the Jordan. When we heard of it, our hearts melted with fear, and everyone's courage failed because of you." Now, her next words are even more important. This is what she said. "For the Lord your God in heaven above and on earth below is the Lord." She was clearly showing her belief in God. She went on to ask for protection, and in doing so was putting her trust in God. Now the spies were amazed about her words and her faith, and promised that when the city was attacked, that she and her family would be spared. All she had to do was to tie a scarlet cord in the window of her house. Now her house was actually part of the city wall, so she let them down by a rope through the window. The spies fled to the hills, where they hid for 3 days, before finally returning to Joshua. We read in chapter 6 that in a great battle, the whole city was destroyed and burnt to the ground. But the 2 spies safely brought Rahab out, and also her family, so they were all spared. So what can we learn from Rahab? Well, firstly, that she was a woman of great faith. She took an amazing risk by hiding the spies, because if she'd been caught, she would have been executed for treason. But she saw her chance, and she was willing to step out in faith. Hebrews chapter 11 is often called the chapter of faith. It's got a long list of men of faith from the Old Testament. And interesting, it's got 2 women too, only 2 women that are mentioned there. They are Sarah, the wife of Abraham, and then in verse 31, Rahab. So the second point, God saw past her sinful life. He saw her heart. And of course, he can still turn around the lives of even the most desperate of people today. One of my favourite books is called Run Baby Run, and it was later made into a film called The Cross and the Switchblade. It tells the story of a man called Nicky Cruz, a man who led a violent gang called the Mau Maus on the back streets of New York. But thanks to the witness of a street pastor called David Wilkerson, he came to faith and spent the rest of his days travelling around the world, sharing his faith with thousands. There's hope for all of us. Thirdly, God recognised her potential and was willing to hold up his whole plan in order to keep her safe. There's a good parallel here with the story of Sodom and Gomorrah in Genesis 19, when God delayed the destruction of the cities so that Lot and his family could be saved. God's timing is long-term and is perfect. And then finally, we need to remember that God's plans are indeed long-term. Rahab married an Israelite called Salmon, and some commentators suggest that he was actually one of the 2 spies. They married, had a son called Boaz, and he was the one who married Ruth. Their son was Obed, and his son was Jesse, and his son was King David. Another 25 generations later, of course, came Jesus himself. So God was able to take Rahab, someone without hope and full of sin, and include her in his family line, the family line of his own dear son. What a wonderful thought, a thought that gives hope to all of us. So that whoever we are, whatever we've done in the past, God offers to forgive us and make us new. Jesus himself confirms this in John chapter 6 verse 37. This is what he says: I will never turn away anyone who comes to me. It is the will of him who sent me that I should not lose any of those who he has given me, but that I should raise them all to life on the last day. So there we are, the story of Rahab. Many thanks for listening, and have a great day. Bye now.